My name is AnnaRae Martin, and I will be reading the first chapter of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte as part of Kirkland Town Library's Read Around the Clock. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning. But since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so somber and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on a chilly afternoon. Dreadful to me was coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgia Reed. The said Eliza, John, and Georgia Reed were now clustered around their mamma in the drawing-room. She lay reclined on the sofa by the fireside, and with her darlings about her, for the time neither quarreling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance. But until she heard otherwise from Bessie, and could discover by her own observation there was an endeavoring in good earnest and acquire more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, and more natural, as it were, she really must exclude me from the privileges intended for the contented, happy little children. "What does Bessie say I have done?" I asked. "Jane, I don't like cavaliers or questioners. Besides, there's something truly forbidding in a child taking up her elders in a manner. Be seated somewhere until you could speak pleasantly. Remain silent." A small breakfast room adjoined the drawing-room. I slipped in there. It contained a bookcase. I soon possessed myself of a volume, taking care that it should be one stored with pictures. Mounted into the window-seat, I gathered up my feet and sat cross-legged, and having drawn the red maroon curtains nearly closed, I shrined myself in a double retirement. Folds of scarlet drapery shut in my view to my right hand. To my left there were clear planes of glass, protecting, but not separating, myself from the dreary November day. At intervals, while turning over leaves in my book, I studied the aspect of that winter afternoon. Afar it offered the plank blank mist of cloud, and near the scene of the wet lawn and storm-beat shrub, with ceaseless rain sweeping away wildly before a long lambasting blast. I returned to my book, Bewick's History of British Birds, to let the tempers therefore I care little for, generally speaking, yet there were certain introductory pages that, as a child, I could not pass quite as blank. There were those that treat of the haunts of seafowl, of the solitary rocks and promotions by them only inhabited, of the coast of Norway, studied of the isles from its southern extremity, the Lydness or the Lays, to the northern Cape. Nor could I pass unnoticed the suggestion of the bleak shores of Limba and Serbia and Spitzenberg, Nova Zembla, Iceland, Greenland, and the vast sleep of the Arctic snow, and those forlorn regions of the dreary space, that reservoir in frost and snow, with the firms of ice, accumulation of centuries, winters, glazed in the alpine heights above heights, surrounded of the pole in the concentration of multiple rigors of the extreme cold. Of these death-white realms I formed the idea of my own, shadowy like all half-comprehended notions that floated dim through children's brains, but strangely impressive. The words in these introductory pages connected themselves in succeeding vignettes, and gave the significance to the rock standing alone in the sea billow and spray, to the broken boat stranded on a desolate coast, to the cold, ghastly moon through the bars of the cold wreck, just sinking. I cannot tell what sentiment haunt the quite solidarity churchyard with its inscribed headstone, its gate, its two trees, its low horizon griddled by a broken wall, and its newly risen crescent assisting to the hour of the evening tide. The two ships becalmed the torpid sea, I believed to be marine phantoms, the fiend pining down the thief's pack behind him. I passed over quickly. It was an object of terror. So was the black horrid thing seated aloof on a rock, surveying a distant crowd surrounding a gallows. Each picture told a story, mysterious often to my undeveloped understanding and imperfect feelings, but yet ever profoundly interesting, as interesting tales Bessie sometimes narrated on winter evenings, when she had the chance to be in good humor, and when, having brought her ironing table to the nursery harp, she allowed us to sit about it, and while she got up Miss Reed's lace frills and crimped her nightcap borders, fed our eager attention with passages of love and adventure taken from old fairy tales and other ballads. Or, as at a later period I discovered, from the pages of Pamela and Henry of Earl and Moore. With Bewick on my knee, I was then happy, well, as happy in my own way. I feared nothing but interruption, and that came too soon. The breakfast room door opened. "Bo, Madam Mope!" cried John Reed. He then paused. He found the room apparently completely empty. "Where the dickens is she?" he continued. "Lizzie, Georgie," calling to his sisters. "Joanna is not here. Tell Mamma she has run into the rain. The bad animal." Well, it is certain that I drew the curtain, I thought, and I wished fervently that he might not discover my hiding place, nor would John Reed have found it out himself. He was not quite vision or conception, but Eliza just put her head in at the door and said at once, "She is at the window seat, to be sure, Jack." And I came forth immediately, for I trembled the idea of being dragged forth by said Jack. "What do you want?" I asked with an awkward indifference. "Say, what do you want, Master Reed?" was the answer. "I want you to come here." And, seating himself in the armchair, he intimated by a gesture that I was to approach, and stand before him. John was a schoolboy of 14 years old, 4 years older than I, for I was but 10, large and stout for his age, with a dingy, unwholesome skin, thick ligaments in a spacious viscous, heavy limbs with large extremities. He gorged himself habitually at the table, which made him bilious, and gave him a dim, bleared-eyed with flabby cheeks. He ought to have been at school, but his mamma had taken him home for a month or two on the account of his delicate health. Mr. Miles, the master, affirmed that he had been doing very well if he had a few cakes and sweetmeats sent to him from home. But the mother's heart turned to that from an opinion so sharp and inclined rather to be a more refined idea that John's sallowness was from overing application and perhaps a pining from home. John had not much affection for his mother or his sisters, and an apathy towards me. He bullied and punished me, not 2 nor 3 times a week, nor once or twice a day, but continually. Every nerve I had feared him, and every morsel of flesh in my bones shrank whenever he came near. There were moments when I was bewildered by terror he inspired. because I had no appeal whatever to either his menaces or afflictions. By the servants he did not like to offend by their young master, by taking my part against his. And Mrs. Reed was blind and deaf on the subject. She never saw him strike or heard him abuse me, though he did both now and then in her very presence, though lately, however, behind her back. Habitually obedient to John, I came up to his chair. He spent some 3 minutes thrusting out his tongue at me as far as he can go without damaging the roots. I knew he would soon strike, and while dreading the blow, I mused on the disgusting and ugly appearance of him who would presently deal with it. I wondered if he read that notion in my face, for, all at once, without speaking, he struck suddenly and strongly. I tottered, and, on regarding my equilibrium, retired back a step or two from his chair. "That is for your impudence in answering mamma a while since," he said, "and for your sneaking away into behind getting the curtains, and for the look you had in your eyes 2 minutes since, you rat." Accosted to John Reed's abuse, I had an idea of replying to it. My care was how to endure the blow which certainly would follow the insult. "What are you doing behind the curtain?" he asked. I was reading. "Show me the book." I returned to the window to fetch it hence. "You have no business to take our books. You are dependent, mamma says. You have no money. Your father left you none. You ought to beg, and not to live here with gentlemen's children like us, and to eat the same meals we do, and wear our clothes at mamma's expense. Now I'll teach you from rummaging through my bookshelves, for they are mine. All the house belongs to me, or will do in a few years. Go and stand by the door, out of the way of the mirror and the windows." I did so, not at first aware what his attention was. But when I saw him lift and pose the book, and stand in an act to hurl it, I instinctively started aside a cry of alarm. Not soon enough, however, as the volume was flung, it hit me. I fell, striking my head against the door, and cutting it. The cut bled. The pain was sharp. My terror had passed its climax. Other feelings had succeeded. "Wicked and cruel boy," I said, "you are like a murderer. You are like a slave-driver. You are like the Roman emperors." I had read Goldsmith's History of Rome, and had formulated my own opinion of Nero, Caligula, and etc. I had also drawn parallels in silence, for which I never thought thus to have declared aloud. "What? What?" he cried. "Did she say that to me? Did you hear her, Eliza Georgina? Won't I tell mamma? But first—" He ran headlong at me. I felt him grasp my hair and shoulder. He had closed with a desperate thing. I really saw him in a tyrant, a murderer. I felt a drop or two of blood from my forehead trickle down my neck, and was sensible of somewhat pungent suffering. The sensations for the time predominated over fear, and I received him in a frantic sort. I don't know very well what I did with my hands, but he called me rat, rat, and bellowed a lot. Aid was near him. Eliza and Georgina had run for Mrs. Reed, who had gone upstairs. She had now come upon the scene, followed by Bessie and her maid Abbot. We were parted. I heard the words, "Dear, dear! What flurry has flung at Master John? Did ever anybody see such a picture of passion?" Then Mrs. Reed subjoined, "Take her away to the Red Room, and lock her in there." 4 hands were immediately laid upon me, and I bore upstairs. Thanks so much for listening, and keep enjoying the upcoming reads. Bye!